This episode is brought to you by the new true crime docuseries American Nightmare, only on Netflix. In 2015, the Vallejo, California Police Department received a strange phone call about a kidnapping. But when the truth is stranger than fiction, you won't know who to trust or what is real. A fast-paced true crime thriller with cliffhangers at every turn. Watch American Nightmare now, only on Netflix.
We
are
cultivate.
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 We are cultivate.
Hello and welcome to Ye Olde Crime, where we discuss the funny, strange, and obscure crimes of yesteryear. I'm your host, Lindsay Valenti, and joining me today is a very special guest, Jo Ann Fawcett. Jo Ann lives in Portland, Oregon. She has an Associates of Arts degrees in film production and accounting. She is the mother of a successful grown daughter and the proud grandmother of 3. She enjoys reading, needlework, travel, and spending time with the family. She is owned by her 2 cats, which as someone with pets myself, I understand how that goes.
Yep.
She has survived 7 toxic marriages and wants to share her stories. She is also an international speaker on the topics of UFOs, extraterrestrials, and military involvement with such topics. Midlife Magic is her first book, which we will be discussing today. Jo Ann, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I love the title of your show.
Thank you.
Yeah.
My sister and I, when we first kind of delved into the world of podcasting, we both had a deep love and appreciation of the podcast lore, which I don't know if you're familiar, but it discusses a lot of older, kind of lesser known cases and things, and that just kind of really spoke to both of us. And it's something that I've always wanted to kind of dive more into, and so hence the podcast.
Great. Well, I'll have to listen to more of it.
So we connected on Podmatch regarding your book, Midlife Magic.
We did.
Can you give our listeners an overview of what your book is about?
Sure. It's basically how I changed my life in my 40s, but it discusses my childhood, why I got married so many times in general, and it talks about each of the first 6 failed marriages and, what happened, the red flags I didn't see, all that kind of stuff. Then there's a few chapters on husband number 7, he was not my ex then, but he is now. And how we met, because he's in prison, and so how we met, what it's like to be a prison wife, and how he introduced me to the world of UFOs and magic and all kinds of woo, which, I totally love. So I left the Mormon church after 30 years, no trauma involved there. I just decided I didn't need it anymore and embraced this new world of woo stuff. And it's just like, basically, it's like anybody can change their life at any age, any time, and find a new path that's better for them. So that's the gist of the story, because it's kind of like 2 halves, but it's all part of one story.
You need the context to get to the next bit that helps.
Exactly.
Yes. Piggybacking off of that,
Sure.
in the book, you chronicle your marriages, which led you to meeting via a mutual friend, Captain Mark Richards.
Correct.
Can you tell us a little bit more about how the 2 of you were connected?
Sure. My roommate at the time is, I don't know if they're still married, but was married to an inmate. They were at the same prison. She came home and I'd already been to visit her husband, and other people at prison. So the prison visiting part didn't scare me. She came home one day and said, I met this friend of my husband's, he's really nice. He's really smart. He's your age. Was visiting his mom. And I thought, smart, that would be a new kind of boyfriend for me. So, okay, I'm happy to meet him. And we wrote for a couple months until I was approved to visit. And then I started visiting him. And then, 1 day a week led into wanting to visit him 4 days a week. And he was just a fascinating person and had a fascinating childhood growing up before prison and interesting military career, even though I didn't really know much about his military career until later, much later. And, we courted for 5 years and then we got married. And then we didn't. We were together 25 years, married for a little over 20. So
That's still, I mean, a long time.
very long time, because my other marriages never lasted more than a few years. That's why I could cram so many in there. Sorry.
So you stated in the book that Mark was the one who kind of first, I don't want to say opened your mind to the possibility, but kind of opened your mind to
It
the
did.
possibility that there was more out there. Can you
Yeah.
kind of share what that meant to you with our
Sure.
listeners?
Because I grew up in the 50s and 60s. You're watching Martian movies and things like that, thinking, oh,
Mm-hmm.
that's fun and scary, but okay, that's all fake. And not right away, but after, and I knew his dad had been in the Air Force, I knew he was in the Army, and then he was in the Navy, but it wasn't until years into the relationship that he started presenting me with writings about, oh, I've been to space and I did this and that. And I met him in 1997. So by the early 2000s, then I was learning, oh, there was more to this family. And
Mm-hmm.
they had some involvement in the space program of the military. And he'd actually been to space. And so had his dad. Like 2004, he said, oh, I hear there's a UFO conference going to be happening in the San Francisco Bay Area. You might want to go. And it's like, okay. And I went and I loved it. And by the next year,
Mm-hmm.
and by then I'd already had some of his information. And by the next year, I had even more. And I knew more of his story about
Mm-hmm.
aliens and space and things. And I had a booth. By then, I'd already formed a nonprofit so that I could bring out his writings and things. And so I had a booth. And then a couple years later, I started getting on radio shows, because I think that was before podcasts, but, a lot of internet radio
Yeah.
shows, things like that. And in 2007, I went to England to give my first talk about UFO, alien, space stuff. And it just kind of blossomed from there. So, yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't fathom the idea of like flying overseas to talk about anything.
It was, oh, so fun. And I did that. I've been to England 5 times. 4 of those trips involved speaking at various conferences. One of them, I spoke at the same conference like 4 times. And then that was in Northern England. And I spoke at a conference in Cornwall. And a couple times I spoke at a conference held outside of London. But I loved it. And most everybody was very receptive. And because I was bringing to the table military involvement, not
Mm-hmm.
just, oh, I saw a UFO. And yes, I have seen UFOs, but it wasn't like I
Mm-hmm.
had it's not my abduction story, because I don't believe I've been abducted, but, it was information that he provided me of his experience and his dad's experience relating to all this stuff. And some of it happened here on the planet, and some of it happened off in space. So, and it's fascinating because I love learning about all the species. So, yeah.
Yeah. Such good segues. So my next question was, you've become quite the public speaker on the topic of UFOs and aliens over the years.
Yes.
Can you share a little bit more about kind of how that came about?
Right. Well, my favorite one, obviously, well, I don't know, obviously, my favorite one was being able to go to England. I really had developed a connection with the people at the Probe UK conference, which is not being held anymore, but it was in Northern England, and the people just treated me like family. And it was like before anybody knew who I was, and I'd never spoken on the topic before, and they said, why don't you come to England and talk about this, and we'll pay for most of your stuff. It's like, okay.
Twist my arm, why don't you?
Yeah. And I got to see England. I got to see many parts of England, because I would tour around and see places that, were mentioned in his reports and things. So I could see, okay, this is
Sure.
where, because his family was stationed in England for a while in the 60s with his dad in the Air Force. And so I could see places they'd been as a family. I could see places where UFO alien stuff had happened that he told me about.
Mm-hmm.
So that was fascinating. And I've spoken at some conferences in the San Francisco area. A couple times I went to Dulce, New Mexico, which is northern New Mexico, on an Apache reservation, and they had a cool conference. But I talked about some nasty things that happened in the underground base in that area. So I've had a number of experiences, and one of my favorite experiences was not far from me, up in Yelm, Washington, like the fall before the pandemic shut everything down. And that's probably
Sure.
the last time I spoke at a UFO conference. And it was, I don't know, there were maybe 50, 50, 60 people. I don't know if there were 100 people, but we could say there were 100, but I don't think there were that many. At least 50 people. And it was so delightful. And my talk was well received. And I get a lot of spiritual, energetic support when I do these things. And especially that day, and especially when I ask for the help. But the people were friendly, they were receptive. I gave one of my favorite talks about the different species. And it was wonderful. And then the pandemic hit, and then obviously nobody was asking me to, there were no in-person conferences. And when they started up again, people were not asking me to speak. And, maybe, and pretty much I had said most of what I had known. And he wasn't writing as much during the pandemic. And at the time there was a nasty journalist harassing us. So that kind of put a kibosh on. I don't know if that kept people from asking me to speak, but anyway, it's like I did my thing, and now I'm talking about aliens in other lights, but not necessarily at UFO conferences, but I do still talk about them when I'm asked. And I got on a lot of podcasts too. So it's like, I love, yes, I'm a Leo. I love public speaking.
I am also a Leo, so I can
Oh,
attest
very
to.
good.
You mentioned in the book that you've been in the presence of elementals.
Yes.
Can you share with our listeners sort of like what an elementals are, like what types of forms they take?
Okay. And are you familiar with that is? Because you read the book, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, cool. Elementals are what most people think of as fairies, because elemental is the broad term. And you can have fairies, brownies, sprites, trolls, gnomes, all kind of different forms, just like you've got different animal forms. And, people look different, humans look different.
Mm-hmm.
And they're energy beings. They can take on physical form, but it takes a lot of effort. And sometimes they do look like the cute little fairy with the little wings, and I've seen that, and that's lovely. Sometimes they, you see in Brand Froud's books these beings that look like stick figures and made out, but they take on, they use natural things, but they take on different forms. And I have some of my favorite. Where I used to live in California, there was a lot of magic at the house, and it had been that way for years. And that's where my ex grew up. And, his dad and everybody was fairies and elementals were a big part of their life. So that's really how I learned about this. Like, we had houses for them and little baskets in the house. And this one, he drew me a map one time of where they lived on the property and in the house, and what their names were. But my first experience really seeing one, it was like I was hanging out at the house. I don't know if it was a full moon. I don't remember the time period, but I was there with a psychic friend of mine. And, we stayed up all night outside to just kind of see who would show up. And I'm looking over at this bush, and all of a sudden I see this most beautiful face that took up the whole space of the bush. And it's like, oh, I don't know. I'm assuming it was the head garden fairy on the property who was living there, but I'm not sure. But she was just beautiful. And there have been other times on the property where I was watering the flowers or the plants or whatever, and something all of a sudden just flitted off, and it's like, oh, that wasn't a butterfly, because it had little human legs, and just it's like I surprised her. And I have, I've been at conferences, and the elementals love to be there. And a lot of people will just start taking pictures, and then you can see the orbs when you look at the pictures. And I've got one great one of when I had been in England at a conference, and I'd gone, left my booth and gone up to the stage to give my talk. And this elemental just, flew after me, and you could see its tail, the tail of energy. It was fabulous. And I have a friend in England, it's like she's very tied into seeing the fairies and ghosts and all kinds of things. And, we've had just wonderful experiences. So they're energy beings. They can take on human form. They're very helpful, especially when you honor them and treat them well. And they can be a little mischievous, because I've, upset some of the ones at the house in California, and then I'd something would go missing, or I'd get pushed down up or down the stairs, and it's like I'd forget something, and then you do a lot of coaxing and asking, and okay, please, I know I'm a silly human, but please help me find this piece of paper. Please help me find my
Mm-hmm.
keys. And all of a sudden, that paper had been pulled out from that pile that I had looked in 5 times, and I'm
Yep.
very used to like leaving them treats, at least on the full and new moons. I used to do it way more often, especially on every quarter moon. Sometimes I don't remember to do that. And holidays, they love
Yep.
treats, and, they love to be respected, and they love Mother Earth, and they really get upset when we don't take care of her. So, and the cool thing that I've learned over the years is other alien species, even if they're not from this planet, have elementals. And if they come to
Hmm.
Earth for a conference or something, they will bring the elementals, because then they can help translate. So it's like, oh, cool, there's
Oh,
elementals everywhere. So yeah, they're
that's cool.
delightful. Yeah, they're delightful.
So you mentioned gifts. Are there any particular gifts that they are more receptive to than others?
I think it depends on the occasion, because there were some times where maybe they would just want like water and bread or something very simple like that. I used to leave out most. Now I just do chocolate or cookies or, sweets. On occasion, I would leave some wine or some mead, because they love the mead. Sometimes it would be peanuts, because, whatever they didn't eat, then the squirrels and the deer would come up and, clean up after them, because, they would basically suck the energy out. But, sometimes, I remember, because I used to leave stuff outside, and I would leave stuff in the house for the house fairies. And,
Mm-hmm.
I remember one time I'd left a piece of chocolate, and I could see like little scratch marks on the chocolate. And I don't think it was from the mice in the house. I want to believe it was from the elementals that lived in the house, but, you know,
Yep.
because the ex grew up with them, he has the ability to see them in their physical form, and he can talk to them. And, I hadn't, I can see their, I can see them through the corner of my eye. I know they're there. I can see them in my photos. And every
Mm-hmm.
now and then they'll fly off a flower. I just act like they're here all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see them in physical form, but I've seen the orbs and things like that. So I have felt them, like I feel ghosts, but I feel them. So I know they're here. I know it's not just, I'm an old woman thinking this is how it is.
I have similar experiences as far as
Oh,
the
cool.
paranormal is concerned, as far as spirits or ghosts or whatever you want to call them. Like, I can't always see the physical form, but I can
Right.
usually like feel them or just kind of know that they're there.
Right. Right. Yes. And if you have animals, the animals definitely see them. And especially because
Yes.
they will like to tease the animals. So, it used to drive I don't know if it drove my cats, but sometimes, the cats would just go running through the house, and it's like, well, somebody's riding them. Somebody's riding on their back.
Yep.
So, and it's like I used to, when I lived at the house in California, we had this lovely garden on up the hill, and I would go there to do my, moon rituals and things like that. And if I was quiet and stuff, I could sometimes see the lights in the trees, because I'd hang out enough and, ask them to be there if they wanted to let me see them a little. So I could see the lights, their lights. So
That's
that
cool.
was cool. Yeah, it was.
You discuss how you were kind of introduced to magic and how it has shaped your life. Can you please describe that process with us?
As I got to know the ex, and I could call him by his name, but
Yeah.
as I got to know him, he would talk to me about his English girlfriend when he lived in England, and they were kids. I think she was 8, he was 7. So like they were very close in age, and they were big childhood chums or friends, and then they got back together and had 3 kids. So, but I learned about, she's from a family of witches, and she was killed in 1979. But we talk to each other. We talk to each other now. We're best friends. And I learned about magical things from him talking about her mostly, and maybe a couple other people. And then it was interesting because I was getting some interest in it. And then I remember, as a bookkeeper, I was taking over a client from this other bookkeeper, and I had to go to her house to pick up the flash drive with the person's accounting records on it. And I walked in, it's like, oh, she's a witch. Oh, this is cool. She's got a flyer on her thing up that she's going to start this magic class. And it's like, oh, and just something inside me is like, oh, I think I want to take this class. And she goes, yeah, she goes, I can smell that you are. She somehow smelled that I am a witch. And I didn't even know that.
That's
I thought,
cool.
okay, I need to become that. And so I started taking, some classes through them and learning more about the basics and stuff, which is cool. So that's, I've been just, I don't want to say dabbling in it. I didn't, so yeah, it's been years now, and I've taken several classes, and mine is very low key, and people go, oh, do you practice black stuff? And I go, no, it's like, and
Yeah.
mine's not very dramatic. It's more about, for me, it's more about honoring the planet, honoring nature, staying in tune with, the elementals and the animals. And I have a very close connection with animals. And I'll share you my deer story, but it's like my intuition has gotten, I can feel it more. And especially when I listen to it and follow it, yeah, that's really cool. It's like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
things work out better when you listen to your and I would start to just know stuff, and then that would drive Mark crazy, because it's like, okay, well, I know that it's like, I know this, and it's like, no, it's like, yes. And sometimes I don't always know the timing, but so I still get the knowing. And I don't do elaborate rituals or anything, but you learn to set intentions, and it's about learning to create your best life. And you don't have to have all the fanciest tools and whatever. And I keep it very simple, but it's like, I've got cards, and I've got a pendulum, and I've got a wand, and I have the things, but
Hmm.
basically but my best magic, I think, comes from being outside almost every day in my neighborhood, and not on my phone, and listening, and just absorbing the energy from the nature, because I've gotten so much inspiration that way. And
Hmm.
especially if I'm about to give a talk, or I need to work on my book, and it's like, oh yeah, here's what you need to say.
Yep.
It's like, oh, I need to go home and write all this down. There used to be a lot of deer. Well, there's a lot of deer on the property in California, because it's near some open, it's a wooded area. And
Hmm.
the deer would always come there, even, when he was a kid, and his dad, it's like, and I would feed, I feed the animals. It's like, that's what I do. But the deer, I would talk to the mama, and the babies would be there every year, and a new mama and a new baby. And okay, well, you were last year's baby. Now you're this year's mama. And I don't know if I'd already moved from the house and I'd gone back for a visit, or I was still living there. But I think it was like early. I think one of my favorite things was early pandemic time, and I was out of cat food, and I had to go to the store like crack of dawn, I think. And I'm walking
Hmm.
down, I'm walking down the driveway, and usually there's just one or two deer at a time in the yard. And all of a sudden, like, this whole slew of mamas and babies go running down the hillside, onto the driveway, across the street, go up the next hill. It's like, oh, well, that's pretty cool. There's a herd of mama
Hmm.
and their babies. And then all of a sudden, they slowly walk, and there's like 5 or 6 bucks from like 2 years old up to great grandpa, with the huge rack of antlers. And it's like, okay, this is cool, because I've never seen the whole herd on the property. And
Yeah.
I just stood there, and grandpa stayed way up here, and this 2-year-old comes walking down the hillside to get pretty close to me, and we're just having this communication. It's like, I know you, I love you, thank you for being here. And it's like, oh, this is so cool. And there was another time when I think after I'd already moved, and then I would have to go back to the house every now and then to check on things or get more stuff. And there's this mama deer she was like up on the upper, the garden level. And I was, down here on the entrance level. And she just came right to the edge and was just looking at me. And I'm talking to her like she's a person, and she gets me. And all of a sudden, this vortex just opens up, like, and
Ooh.
this beautiful, just communication, like, I am now one with the deer thing. And it's like, then I go back and tell my friends, in the spirit world, it's like I have this cool connection, and it's like, yeah, now you really are like one. The animals accept you, and it's like I just have this connection with the animals, and it's amazing. So it's like,
That's
yeah,
cool.
yeah.
That's really cool. briefly touched on spirits as far as the paranormal is concerned,
Sure.
and you mentioned several encounters that you had in the book, both on your own and also with other mediums. Can
Yeah.
you kind of share with our listeners a little more about that?
Sure. On my own, before I really knew this was much of a thing, and then I kind of forgot about it till I was with Mark. One time I was married to a guy who was a funeral director for a while, and it started out I would just sing at the people's funerals. He
Mhm.
needed a singer, and I'd sing, and that was fine. And then one time he had to transport this old woman's body to, from Southern California to Northern California, where he was going to do a graveside service. And I think there was 2 family members there. And so I went with him, and I'm standing there, just being the supportive wife. And, the dead woman's right there. And it's like, and again, I don't
Yeah.
see their bodies. I can feel it. And it's like, oh, hi.
Mhm.
It's like, it was just, it's like, la di da. And it's like, it was so cool that she was like standing right there. And it was like, it was just so peaceful and calm. And, she was just watching how it was going. And then another time with the same husband, we were now living in Ohio, and his sister's mother-in-law had passed. And I had met the woman, once or twice. And so I sang at her funeral. So like in the Mormon church, the where the podium is, it's kind of elevated above
Yep.
where the audience. Okay, I'm up here in the front doing my singing. But back in the back of the chapel is the mother-in-law hanging out up near the ceiling, and I can point to the exact spot where she was. And it's like, oh, what's her name is there. And it's like, this is so cool, because I just know she's there watching over. And that was really cool. Then there were a couple different mediums that I've been with, one in California and my friend in England. And one of them, well, I've been on the Hornet aircraft carrier in the San Francisco Bay Area with both of them. And it's well known, for its military history, but it's also well known for its ghost activity. And that's
Yes.
part of their marketing. And it's great. If you ever have the opportunity to go there, it's a fabulous thing for both the military history and the ghost stuff. So I went on there with this one psychic one time, and she was also a docent. So we could go on after hours, and, we're walking through this hall. It's like, oh, it feels a little cold in here. And it's like the walls feel kind of wet. It's like, then we went to the forecastle, which is at the front of the ship, where all the anchors and the chains for the anchors are, laying on the floor. And then we went up these stairs because she wanted to walk through like where a lot of the sailors were, their bunks were and stuff. So
Sure.
she's walking up the stairs. She's gone through the door. I'm walking up this ladder stair thing, and I stop because just beyond me is like this column, and there's a ghost peeking out to say hello to me. And it's like, oh, this is so cool. It's like, and it just looked like a gray shadow to me, but I could see it. And it's like, hi, I'm not here to hurt you. I'm just here to say hi, and thanks for showing up. And I couldn't wait to go meet up with my friend. It's like, I saw a ghost. And it was so scary. It wasn't scary. And there had been some negative alien things that had happened on that ship over time. And Mark had said, well, go see if you feel anything weird by the medical bay. And it hadn't been restored, so you couldn't go in there. But we were in the chapel by the medical bay, and it's like, yes, the medical bay is like, you could just feel the negative energy coming through the
Oh,
door. It's like, okay,
yeah.
not gonna go. Glad we can't go in there because they haven't cleared
Yep.
that energy out. But we're in the chapel, and that hadn't been restored yet. So there's a bunch of boxes, and we could both sense that, like, there's this scared sailor crouching behind a box. And it's like, and I think that particular, both of them can see the ghost. I can just see the shadow and feel the energy. And it's like, it's okay. Don't be scared, because on the Hornet, you might have served on that ship, you might have died on that ship, or you might just be another Navy person who died somewhere but really wanted to hang out with all the ghosts that are on the Hornet. And
Yeah,
some of them
sure.
are not settled, and some of them are not transitioned, or haven't ever even passed over. But this one particular one was really scared, and I don't know why, but we helped calm him down, and that was pretty cool. One of the funny stories, especially about the Hornet, because it's not just my story, but the women's restroom on like the main hangar deck is now used to be the engine room. So, and there were never women on this serving on this ship for the Navy.
Sure.
And,
Sure.
it was this engine room. And so you get these women telling these stories about like when they're sitting in the bathroom and then they can just feel this presence. And it's like, so these voyeurs, these ghosts are like very nosy. And I didn't feel that when I was in the restroom, but I would stand out in the hangar bay and take photos with my black and white 35 millimeter, because then the energy of ghosts and fairies really pop out when you're using black and white film. So that was really cool. And, and I've had an image of my father-in-law. I have a great picture of him in like his flight goggles and things. And I have an image of him showing up while I was on the Hornet, because as an Air Force person, he also had interaction. He was a liaison with the Navy people who were at Alameda Naval Air Station, but he also had been on that particular ship for alien things. But both times I've been on that ship with the two different mediums and we've gone up on the flight deck, he's been right by me. He'll stand right by me and they can see him and I can feel him. And he's like, I never knew him. He died before I met Mark. But he's like my great support. We talk regularly through the channeling medium that I talk to the spirit world with. Most all the talks I've given at different conferences, he's been over behind my left side. He's always on my left side.
That's cool.
And, he's very supportive and, he's always encouraged me to stand up for the truth and speak the truth. And, he's always been very supportive of what I was doing. And that's so validating. And to have this great support person that I never knew when he was alive, because he's a military hero in his own right. And even to get, it's like, okay, this is what your son has told me about these aliens. Okay, now do you have any other stories you can tell me now that you're dead? and share things. If he can remember them, he'll share them. So it's nice to get the insight from both the living and the dead, because it's like maybe there's stuff he experienced but he couldn't tell his son, because everything you need to know things. So we've developed a fabulous relationship. So that's really cool. And in England, especially with my England psychic friend, we've been to a lot of historical sites and seen and felt ghosts. And especially one of my favorite ones, and this is in the book, we went to Dover Castle, which is near where she used to live one time. And so we're just walking around checking out the castle, because I love that kind of stuff and I love medieval history. And we're walking up this huge flight of stairs, and next to the throne room, there's like a room where the guards would probably hung out, because if the king needs you right away, you gotta, be right there. Anyway. And so we're standing there. I'm in the doorway taking pictures of the room just as a tourist. She's over by the window, and all of a sudden this blue energy ghost thing just comes shooting past her through me. It's like, oh, well, that was cool. that was like, and it's blue and I can see it, and it's real. I can see it coming right through me with the camera. It was amazing. And then we walked into the throne room, and I had the best experience of a past life that I've ever. It's like all of a sudden it was like I almost felt faint, and it's like I was kind of dizzy for a minute, and then I just started crying. And it's like, I have had a past life at this castle, not in the kitchen. I was, at least some kind of lady in waiting or something. I wasn't the queen, but that's okay. But I was something in that castle during medieval times. It's like, what? It's like you can't deny that when you have that feeling. It's like, I don't know how people. It's like, this is so real. And it's interesting because I met a psychic here in Portland. He comes to my local bookstore every now and then, and one of the events he was doing, you could ask about, get an angelic message or somebody from a loved one, or learn about a past life. And I said, oh, give me a past life thingy. And he goes, oh, you were a musician, you were like a Celtic harp player. And it's like, okay, well, that would resonate with me, because I feel very strong connections to Celtic background, and I've not good at playing instruments, but I love to sing. So I could see that the musical ability has come through different lifetimes. Sure. It's like, it was really nice to have a person that I didn't know, confirm that. So yeah. And she and I've been other places where we've come across other ghosts and other fairy things. It's very magical. And trying not to scare the public. It's like, if you're talking about what you're seeing, it's like, oh, nothing. It's okay.
We're all good over here. It's fine.
Who are you seeing? Oh, nothing.
feel like there's so many great places to visit in England. Like, I've only
Yeah.
been there once,
Okay.
but it's just such great history, and especially castles. Like, there's just
Yeah.
there's just so much, like, energy and history, and it's like you kinda go to a completely different place almost. It's
Exactly.
its own world.
Where were you at?
So we went to the Tower of London,
Okay.
which was really interesting for me because on my mom's side, she traced our ancestry back where we are descended from Anne Boleyn.
Oh, wow.
So it was really weird being by like where the scaffold was, you
Uh-huh.
know. And it I remember when we were there, and I was like 16 at the time. I was in the UK and Ireland for a like student ambassador type
Oh,
thing
nice. Cool.
for like 3 weeks. And I remember it was really hot outside, and we're standing next to the scaffold and like where, like the executioner's block was, but
Yeah.
I felt freezing cold.
Oh, wow.
Like everyone else is just like sweating, and I'm sitting there and I was like, "No, no, no. Like I am like it's cold here. Like this is like ice cold." Like it
Mm.
felt like when you walk into a chest freezer, like if
Right,
you're at like
right,
a grocery store or
right,
something. And
right.
it was cool, but it was also really like eerie, like,
Uh-huh.
just being in that spot. I'm trying to think of some of the other castles we visited in like Scotland and Wales, but
Yeah, I haven't been to Scotland yet. I didn't make it to Wales. I've been to Ireland once. One of my trips to England, we went to Ireland for a week. But one of my trips to England, because my friend moved from the Kent area where Dover Castle is up to Norfolk and Blickling Hall. Yeah, it's like so. Blickling Hall is like a nice, lovely manor house, and that's
Mhm.
where Anne Boleyn was born. So
Yes.
we didn't. I didn't get to go to some of the other castles where she lived, but I was at the one, and we had some lovely ghost experiences there, and even, and then especially because there's it's like, okay, we're seeing stuff, and these people are going, huh? It's like, and we also, you go through the formal gardens, and then there's a little sign, secret garden, and you go like through this bush, and it's the typical, you go through this little hedge or a doorway, and there's just little
Mhm.
square garden, and we just sat down, and like the fairy energy was so amazingly strong there. It's like, I don't want to leave. I don't want to leave. It's so beautiful sitting here
Yeah.
feeling all the fairies right there. But yeah, so that was cool. I didn't get to the one, but I think it's Blickling Hall where they say, they used to be able to see her carriage go up and down. But anyway, I've got a book somewhere about the ghosts in England and stuff like that. But yeah, it's a lot of cool stuff going on there.
I think we went to Hampton Court Palace,
Oh,
which
wow.
was
I haven't
where,
been there.
King Henry lived there, right? King Henry
Yeah,
VIII
yeah,
lived there.
that's a big one.
And I can't remember exactly where I was in the building, but there were some spots where I was like, "Well, this kind of not quite right energy, but not necessarily
Right, right.
evil, but just like, I don't
Yeah,
think good things happened in this spot," type of
yeah. It's
uncomfortable feeling.
it it's interesting because at Dover now, as part of the tourist attraction, they've restored some of there's some underground like tunnel areas where they had communication ba- stuff for World War II, and they had a
Sure.
hospital under there. So that's all restored. And so we took the tour through the hospital, and they have some sounds going on, and they have some smells. It's part of this touristy thing. And
Mhm.
our docent, we were talking to him, and he's had paranormal experiences in the hospital area. So we're going along, and we get into the operating theater, and it's like, oh, and my friend and I are going, oh yeah, the guy on the operating table is here. And it was like so eerie. And he's going, okay, did you feel anything? Did you get anything? And we're going, oh yeah. And as everybody's going, what?
Yeah.
Nothing. But then I don't know if you to along the coast of England, like going up the east side, is called the Cinque Port. So it's like five castles that were like to guard the coast against France invading, and
Sure.
and one of
Sure.
them is where the warden of the Cinque Port lives, and that's really nice and foo-foo and gardeny, and even the Queen Mom had been the warden of the Cinque Port at one time, so it's beautiful and lovely, and just very friendly feeling. And then my friend took me to one of the other ones that was in the area, and that's the only two that we went to. But this other one was a military fort, definitely right on the coast, And so you're walking around seeing where the soldiers lived and blah, blah, blah. And you go down in the basement level, and we got to this one part. And I'm not sure, they must have had a dungeon area, but there was one part, and it's like we're getting this really negative energy because we got to go. They don't want us here. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
And it's just like,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
If you're into, and you'll know, you get the difference. It's like, okay, gotta
Yeah.
go.
There definitely have been some occasions in my life where I have encountered the, like, I jokingly call it the "I'd turn back if I were you" type of vibe, like,
Uh-huh.
maybe don't go over here.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and sometimes, that's the way your intuition works too, because it's like you'll get a hit like, okay, yeah, no, don't go there, or don't do this, or it's like, you got to turn back, or it's like you need protection against, certain things. And yeah, it's interesting how I've been like places filming or researching. It's like, yeah, go, and I got to leave the room. That person's here for, he's following me. I gotta go. And
Mhm.
okay, let's go to another area. I was like, yeah, or like,
Mhm.
you're here
Mhm.
just to check up on me. And I was like, I gotta go. See ya.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's a difference between, like, "Here I am" versus "Get out." Like, those are
yeah,
2 very different energies.
yeah.
Well, on that note, for any
Yes.
of our listeners who may be interested in kind of learning more about what we discussed today, like whether that's extraterrestrials or UFOs or the paranormal or magic, do you have any guidance for them as far as where you would point them, what direction you would point them?
Well, I've got a couple of, it's like I've got the book, I've got a website that has the UFO space reports still on it. I don't have the nonprofit anymore, but people are willing. I mean, people are. I'm open to people emailing me with questions, but I mean, it's just in your local area, depending on what you're, because there's usually a meetup group for pretty much anything you want to do. So like most areas have a MUFON group if you're interested in learning more about UFO sightings and things like that, or just even a meetup group about UFO and paranormal activity. If you're interested in learning more about magic and witchcraft, there's all kinds of groups around. And there's a lot of books. And you just have to, I was going to say, use your discernment, because obviously not everything you're going to see on the internet or everything in any book is, but you
Sure.
just have to learn how to pick what's going to resonate with you. And that's my big advice, is like, does it resonate with you? And because there's
Yep.
many ways to look at all this different stuff, and aliens can be both scary and friendly. you know Witchcraft can
Yep.
be both dark and not dark, and
Yep.
all kinds of things. So I choose to stick to the lighter side of things, and the white light stuff, and the healing
Mhm.
stuff. And but I love
Mhm.
to teach people about all this kind of stuff. So I there's no one place you can go to learn it all.
Yes. Yes, there's a variety of avenues.
Yes, there's all kinds of resources usually in most areas, or we can help point you in directions.
So if you were given the chance to change anything or re-experience anything that you've experienced to date since kind of introduced to this second part of your life, does anything pop to mind or of anything that you'd like to do or experience again?
It's not necessarily experience again, but it's like, I really, and even though it's I forbidden, I would really like to. My lifelong dream is I want to get to the point where I can have a piece of property and have the aliens and we're all having tea together, and we're all just talking and interacting in a friendly manner and learning about one another, because that's part of my mission, is teaching aliens and teaching humans about aliens. So I would like more of that. And so I still, and I also, part of my mission calling, what it's like, I feel very called to emphasize to people how connected humans and magic and fairies and aliens are, because we're all part of this big
Sure.
universal galactic community. And there's
Mhm.
witches out there among the aliens, and there's fairies among the aliens. So it's, we're just all part of the same thing. And I would love to go back to other places I visited and do more of that, to really get the
Mhm.
feel of places. And I love to travel, but I don't know if that
Yeah.
answered your question, but that's kind of what I want to do. It's like I would like to do more of that, and I'm at the age where I will be not slowing down, but I will be cutting back from my bookkeeping work, retiring, so to speak.
Yeah.
I hopefully will have more time to do that and research that and do more writing and, really tap into the spirit stuff and the intuition stuff.
I guess final question before I open it to you, if there's anything that I've missed that you would like our listeners to know. How has your life changed since you started down this new path?
Well, it's totally different than being a Mormon, I'll tell you that.
What? No.
Yeah. It's like all of a sudden I'm open to all these new topics and
Hmm.
a whole different worldview that I never even thought about before. And again, it's not so strange and mysterious, this whole witchcraft topic. It's just a
Hmm.
different way of doing things and seeing life. And it's just science. And it's just, I shouldn't say
Yep.
just, it's science and it's natural laws. It's like, I think my life is way better because I am way happier. And especially after this last divorce, I'm way happier. And I'm on a path that is my path.
Sure. Yeah.
And it wasn't that way before. It was his path. Bless him. He's a military hero, but it was his path. So, that's the next book. But it's more about how am I supposed to serve others and serve the greater community. And
Hmm.
by doing that, I am finding all kinds of joy. So,
That's awesome. Finding your own path. That's good.
yeah. And you can still do that if you have a partner. And just hopefully they support
Yep.
you on your path. But I've learned what my specific path is and what I want it to be, and that's how I, you know, guide my ship.
There you go. Nothing
Yeah.
wrong with that.
No.
Is there anything else that I didn't touch on that you'd like our listeners to know, either about you or about the book?
I think you've got all the websites right. So the Midlife Magic is available on the website or on Amazon or and whatever that. And I've got a couple of emails, and I'm pretty soon I'll have a whole joannfawcett.com will be up and running, and it's going to talk about some of this. The woo stuff is probably going to be a different website, but it's about the new book and my new speaking and my new healing stuff, and so just all kinds of things. But again, I've got a lot of different emails. I've got Facebook under this name. I got a LinkedIn, so you can find me, and if you want to talk to me or have questions, just go ahead and do that. That'd be great. Obviously I love to talk.
Well, you've got a lot of really interesting things to say. So, I
Thank
mean,
you. Thank you.
why not?
I know.
And it's the Leo in us, so I get
It
it.
is. And I've said is I'm letting the Leo out. I kind of left her in a box for a long time, and now she's out of the cage. So it's all good.
Yeah. And they don't always like to go back in, I'll tell you that. Like that's
No, she doesn't want to
no,
go back in at all.
I feel that.
Yeah.
Well, I would like to thank Jo Ann for joining me today, taking time to discuss midlife magic and more about yourself. And we will have links to her website to purchase the book, all the different links that you mentioned before. And on that note, as always, I'm Lindsay, and I'll see you next time with another tale as old as crime.